Hello Year 10, so here is your next lesson. I believe it is our 11th since lockdown began, second lockdown began anyway. And today we're going to be looking at the similarities and differences in the presentation of nature and childhood in Wordsworth's The Prelude and Heaney's Death of a Naturalist. But as always, we will start off by revising and going over some past vocabulary today. We're not going to have a new word today, we're just going to revise some old vocabulary. So first of all, personification. What is personification and how is Heaney's use of punishing sun personification? What is an oxymoron? And how is marriage hearse an oxymoron, and why has Blake described or used that oxymoron in the poem? And then rapture. Why is winter a time of rapture for the young Wordsworth in the Prelude? So you can pause the video, try and recall those words and answer the questions. So personification is when human characteristics are given to a thing or an object. So punishing sun is personification because a sun cannot punish anyone. It isn't a sentient being with its own thoughts and feelings like a human. So describing the sun as punishing is used for deliberate effect, and it is used to describe that sort of punishing, overwhelming, exhausting heat when the sun is really beating down on you on one of those boiling hot days. Oxymoron are two things that do not make sense together. So hot snow or cold fire. So marriage hearse is an oxymoron because marriage equals, is new life and hearse is death. Now, there's various ways of interpreting Blake's use of an oxymoron at the end of London. One interpretation, and the one we talked about in the lesson, was that essentially, unless people rise up and overthrow the establishment, life is so miserable, this cycle of poverty and restriction is never ending, that even something as positive as new life in a marriage is essentially only going to end in misery and death. So it's this idea that unless people choose to break free of these metaphorical mind-forged manacles, that there will never be anything positive and good for people. Rapture means intense joy and happiness, and winter is a time of rapture for the young William Wordsworth in the Prelude because, as a romantic poet, he believed that childhood and a young innocent child was the ideal state because it is only as an innocent child that you can truly appreciate and enjoy the beauty of nature. It's as you get older and you lose that innocence that you begin to understand the sort of dangerous, more darker side of not just life, but nature as well. So today we're going to be comparing the themes of nature and childhood in the Prelude and in Death of a Naturalist. So how is the themes of nature and how are the themes of childhood represented? So we're going to look at the similarities and differences in both of those themes. So if you can just pause the video now and jot down that knowledge goal. So both poems share common themes, and we know that in your real exam you will not just be asked to write about a poem by itself. As we've been practicing during lockdown, you've done an analysis of London and you've also done an analysis of To Autumn. What we have in the exam is the second question, where you have to compare a poem with the same theme to the poem you've just written about. So it's important to link these themes together, these poems together based on their shared themes. And Death of a Naturalist and The Prelude are two very good poems to do because they share a lot of common themes. They're both about the passing of time. They're both got this idea of decay or decline. They both have this idea of this sort of cycle of nature, and you could add To Autumn, of course, into a lot of these as well. They both focus on childhood, and they both focus on this idea of innocence versus experience. And looking at these comparisons in more detail is what we're going to be focusing on today. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to write down this question. How do both Heaney and Wordsworth present the themes of nature and childhood? Because this is what we're going to be exploring today. Just pause the video and write that down. So I'm going to ask you to draw a Venn diagram. Now, Venn diagrams can be really useful for comparing the similarities and differences between poems. And in a minute, I'm going to switch to a visualizer and sort of start you off, really. So what we want here is to label one of your circles the Prelude, your other circle Death of a Naturalist. And we know what is the same is where the two circles cross over, and what is different is in the two separate circles. So really think about, how do the poems differ in their presentation of nature and childhood? How are they the same? And then why? So I'm going to attempt to switch over to the visualizer in a second. Here we go. So I don't have anything circular to draw around, so I apologise in advance for my, oh, you just saw me then, which you weren't supposed to. Oops, for my crappy circles. So I have circle number 1. I'm going to try and make sure quite a lot is overlapping because I have a few things to say. Yeah, that circle definitely looks like someone sat on it. So hopefully your circles look better than mine. So I'm going to label 1, the Prelude, 1, Death of a Naturalist. So what is the same needs to go here. What is the different? What is different? And remember, I'm presenting, looking at how nature and childhood, that's what I'm focusing on. So they're both from the point of view of children. So that's one thing. They both show a potential loss of innocence, for example. So I would go in here and I'd look at what's similar. I'm not going to do all of them for you, but that's an example of 2. Well, what's the differences then? Well, I know that the context is different, because whereas, you know, Wordsworth was one of the classic romantic poets, I know that Heaney was not. He could be classified as a neo-romantic poet or a new romantic poet. I know that one is focusing on winter, one on summer. I know that one focuses on ice skating, one on collecting frog spawn. For example. So, you know, you are simply just at this point trying to collect what is similar and then what is different. I'm not going to sort of give you all the answers because this is just a way of you trying to engage how much you have learnt about these 2 poems. I thoroughly suggest you use your annotation of both poems to help you as well. So pause the video now and try and fill all of those circles up with information from the poems. You'll be pleased to know at this stage you're not going to be writing a comparison or an analysis. We don't feel that would be fair to ask you to do remotely at this stage. We just want you to use this as an opportunity to think about the links between those poems, because if we were in school, that is what we would do. We would actually build up towards writing a proper full comparison. So be glad you're just having to do a Venn diagram at this stage. So pause the video, please. So I'm just going to upload one final slide for you to do. So now you should have filled up your Venn diagrams. The last thing I would like you to do is have a go at answering as many of these 10 questions as you can. Now, don't worry if you can only answer some of them. This is just helping you to recall and think back to your work on Death of a Naturalist in your last lesson. So you can pause the video and answer these questions. Remember, it's important now that for every lesson you are watching, you upload your notes, your work to your class teacher. And I will see you next time.